The restaurant was busy that evening, filled with the warm sound of quiet conversations, clinking glasses, and soft music playing in the background. It was one of the most popular places in the city, known for its elegant atmosphere and wealthy customers. Waiters moved quickly between tables while guests enjoyed expensive meals and long conversations. Everything seemed normal until Victor Hale walked in. Victor was a well-known millionaire in the area. He owned several businesses and was famous for his flashy lifestyle. People often recognized him the moment he entered a room. That night was no different. Wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile, he walked in with two of his business partners and immediately demanded the best table in the restaurant. The manager quickly arranged a table near the window, hoping to keep the influential guest satisfied. Soon, a young waitress named Maya approached their table. Maya was calm, polite, and professional. She had been working in the restaurant for nearly a year and had a reputation for being one of the most hardworking employees. "Good evening, sir. Welcome," Maya said kindly as she handed them the menus. Victor barely looked at her. He waved his hand impatiently and began ordering expensive dishes and drinks for the table. Maya carefully wrote everything down and went to the kitchen. The evening moved smoothly at first. Maya served their drinks, checked on the table, and continued working around the busy restaurant. But as time passed, Victor became louder and more demanding. He complained about small things and treated the staff with little respect. Then the moment happened. As Maya brought another round of drinks to the table, someone bumped into her slightly from behind. The tray tilted for a second, and a few drops of water splashed onto the table near Victor's arm. It was barely noticeable, but Victor reacted as if something terrible had happened. He suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire section of the restaurant turned to look. "Are you serious right now?" he shouted angrily. Maya immediately apologized. "I'm very sorry, sir. It was an accident. I'll clean it right away." But Victor wasn't interested in hearing it. His face turned red with anger. Instead of accepting the apology, he kicked the chair next to Maya, making it slide across the floor. Several guests gasped quietly at the sudden outburst. "You people can't even do a simple job properly," he barked loudly. The restaurant grew quiet. The music still played, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Guests looked uncomfortable, unsure whether someone would step in. Maya stood still for a moment. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stepped back calmly. Inside, however, she was far from weak. What Victor didn't know, what nobody in the room realized, was that Maya had spent many years training in martial arts before ever working as a waitress. Discipline, control, and patience had been part of her life long before she ever carried a tray of drinks. She wasn't afraid of Victor. She was simply choosing peace. But as Victor took another aggressive step forward, the tension in the room grew thicker. Several people held their breath, sensing that the situation was about to change in a way Victor never expected. And the next few seconds would silence the entire restaurant. Victor's anger was still boiling as he stepped closer to Maya. The restaurant had gone almost completely silent. Forks paused in the air, conversations stopped, and dozens of eyes watched the tense scene unfold. Victor believed he was in control. In his mind, Maya was just a waitress who would apologize again and step away like everyone else usually did when he raised his voice. But Maya didn't move. She stood calmly beside the table, her posture relaxed but steady. Her eyes were focused, not with fear, but with quiet awareness. Years of discipline had taught her how to stay calm even in heated moments. Victor scoffed when he noticed she wasn't backing away. "Oh, so now you're staring at me," he said mockingly. "Do you even know who you're dealing with?" Maya spoke gently, her voice steady. "Sir, I already apologized. It was an accident. I don't want any trouble." But Victor wasn't finished. The humiliation of the spilled water, combined with his ego and the attention from the surrounding guests, pushed him to act even more aggressively. He reached forward suddenly, attempting to shove Maya aside. That was the moment everything changed. Before anyone could even understand what was happening, Maya reacted with calm precision. Her movement was smooth and controlled. Instead of resisting with force, she simply caught Victor's wrist at the exact moment his hand reached her. Victor's confident expression instantly shifted to confusion. In one fluid motion, Maya redirected his momentum. She stepped slightly to the side while guiding his arm downward. Victor lost his balance and stumbled backward, barely managing to stay on his feet. A collective gasp spread across the restaurant. The entire moment lasted only 2 seconds. Maya immediately released his wrist and stepped back again, her hands open and relaxed. She had no intention of hurting him. Her actions were purely defensive. Victor stood frozen, stunned by what had just happened. His business partners looked shocked. Guests at nearby tables stared in disbelief. Some people had even started recording the moment on their phones. The millionaire who had walked in with loud confidence now looked embarrassed and confused. How did you?" Victor started to say, but the words didn't come out properly. Maya calmly adjusted her uniform and spoke in a respectful tone. "I don't want to fight, sir," she said. "I only want to do my job and be treated with respect." Her voice wasn't angry. It was composed and sincere. That made the moment even more powerful. Victor looked around the room and realized everyone had witnessed what happened. The attention he once enjoyed now felt uncomfortable. The arrogance that filled him minutes earlier slowly turned into quiet humiliation. For the first time that evening, he had nothing to say. The once loud dining room remained silent, but the energy had completely changed. People who had felt uncomfortable earlier now watched Maya with quiet admiration. She had defended herself without violence, without anger, and without losing control. Victor slowly straightened his jacket, avoiding eye contact with the surrounding guests. The power he thought he had over the situation had disappeared in an instant. And in that quiet moment, everyone in the restaurant understood something clearly. True strength doesn't shout. Sometimes, it simply stands calm and lets actions speak for themselves. For several long seconds, the restaurant remained completely silent. No one moved, and no one spoke. The moment felt almost frozen in time. Victor stood in the middle of the dining area, his face burning with embarrassment. Just minutes earlier, he had been the loudest person in the room, acting as if he owned the place. Now, every pair of eyes was on him for a very different reason. His business partners shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure what to say. A few guests quietly whispered to each other, while others continued holding their phones, recording the aftermath of what had just happened. Maya, meanwhile, remained calm. She didn't look proud or angry. She simply stood there with quiet composure, the same way she had stood when the night first began. The manager of the restaurant hurried over, clearly nervous about the situation. "Sir, is everything all right?" he asked Victor carefully. Victor didn't answer immediately. His pride was struggling with the reality of what had just occurred. He glanced at Maya, then at the surrounding tables. The confidence he once displayed had completely faded. For the first time that evening, he realized something important. His anger had started this entire situation. Maya had only been doing her job. One of the guests nearby finally spoke up. "Maybe you should just let it go," the man said calmly. Another customer nodded in agreement. She handled that with more respect than most people would. Victor heard the comments, and they only made the silence heavier. He had expected the crowd to support him, to treat him like the powerful millionaire he believed himself to be. Instead, the room seemed to admire the waitress he had tried to bully. Maya gently picked up the chair that Victor had kicked earlier and placed it back beside the table. Her movements were simple and respectful, as if nothing dramatic had happened at all. Then she looked at Victor and spoke again, her tone still calm. "Sir, if you'd like, I can bring fresh drinks for the table." The offer surprised everyone. She wasn't mocking him. She wasn't trying to embarrass him further. She was simply continuing her work. Victor stared at her for a moment, clearly struggling with what to say. The arrogance that had controlled him earlier now felt misplaced. Finally, he cleared his throat. "No, that won't be necessary," he said quietly. It was the first time that night his voice carried no anger. Victor slowly sat back down at the table. His partners remained silent, avoiding eye contact with the surrounding guests. Across the restaurant, people began returning to their meals, but the story of what had happened was already spreading from table to table. The wealthy man who thought money gave him power had just learned a very public lesson. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be given. As for Maya, she simply continued her shift like any other evening. She served other tables, smiled politely at customers, and carried trays through the dining room with the same calm confidence. But the people who had witnessed the moment would not forget it anytime soon. Because that night, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, a quiet waitress had reminded everyone of something important. True strength isn't about money, status, or shouting the loudest. True strength is staying calm, standing your ground, and choosing dignity even when others choose disrespect.